In today's video, we will present 3 news items from the field of space exploration. We begin with the latest news. On the same day as this video was published, the Japanese lunar lander SLIM touched down on the moon. We will also discuss the launch of the AX-3 private mission to the International Space Station. We will conclude today's episode by examining the static fire of the RS-25 rocket engine. The Japanese lunar lander, SLIM, launched in September and entered lunar orbit on December 25th. It gradually lowered its orbit in the following weeks, and on January 19th, it attempted to land. SLIM activated its main engines at 15 o'clock Universal Time and used correction thrusters to maintain its orientation. The landing maneuver started. The main objective of the Japanese lunar lander was to test the technology for precise lunar landing within 100 meters of the target coordinates. During the descent, cameras were capturing images of the terrain. An onboard computer compared them with a map stored in memory. The lander used this information to decide what maneuvers to execute during the descent to reach its destination. Less than 2 meters above the surface, SLIM was planned to eject 2 small rovers, LEV-1 and LEV-2. The lander itself should have tipped over and land on its legs with deformation zones. Telemetry readings during the descent showed no issues. At 15:20 Universal Time, the SLIM lander landed. However, the control center could not confirm that all systems were working properly. Based on the available information, it seems that SLIM landed on the moon, but its condition is uncertain. The ground control center is receiving signals from the lander and the LEV-1 rover. The problem with the SLIM lander is that its batteries are not recharging. Therefore, its mission will be shorter than planned. The ground control center wants to collect as much data as possible before the batteries run out. The landing did not go as expected, but the lander is communicating and following commands. It also deployed both rovers. The landing could be considered partially successful, so Japan would become the 5th country in the world to achieve a soft landing on the moon, but we should wait for JAXA's evaluation of the mission. On January 18th at 21:49 Universal Time, engines of the Falcon 9 ignited after a 1-day delay. SpaceX's reliable launch vehicle has lifted off from the Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
Ignition, engine full power, and liftoff. Go Axiom 3.
The launcher carried a Crew Dragon spacecraft as its cargo. The interesting fact about the Axiom 3 mission is that it is the first all-European private spaceflight. The commander, Michael López-Alegría, is a former NASA astronaut with dual American and Spanish citizenship. The pilot, Walter Villadai, is an Italian Air Force officer. He has already experienced a suborbital flight on board Spaceship Two during Galactic 01 mission last year. The crew also includes the first Turkish citizen to orbit the Earth. Alper Gazarafci has a background as a military and civilian pilot. The final crew member is Marcus Vondt from Sweden. He is a military pilot and a European Space Agency Reserve astronaut since 2022. He became the first of his group to fly in space. Therefore, he also surpassed all the career astronauts who were selected in the same year. The first stage of Falcon 9 returned to the launch site this time. With the experience acquired, SpaceX can now land the first stages from missions with the second-generation Dragon spacecraft on the land instead of using their autonomous drone ship. The cylinder, which is over 40 meters tall, successfully touched down on the concrete pad of LZ-1. This was the fifth reuse of this particular first stage. The Crew Dragon spacecraft separated from the Falcon's upper stage a few minutes later, with the crew capsule being reused for the third time. It is expected to dock with the International Space Station on Saturday, January 20th, around 9:15 Universal Time. We will focus on that docking and the crew's upcoming tasks in the next episode. The RS-25 rocket engine tests will continue in 2024. On January 17th, another test took place at the Fred Haise test site at the Stennis Space Center near Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. NASA officials and Aerojet Rocketdyne, the manufacturer of these Hydrolox engines, are mainly interested in collecting data from these tests. This data will help certify the newly built RS-25 engines, which will be used on SLS rockets from the Artemis V mission onwards. Engineers are examining the behavior and performance of several new engine components, such as nozzles, hydraulics, flexible linkages, or turbopumps. The current series of tests is the last step before certification and production of these improved engines. The RS-25 engine's static fire on January 17th was flawless. As expected, the engine burned for 500 seconds, the same duration as its operation during an actual flight on an SLS rocket. Thank you for your attention to today's episode of Spaceflight News. We are delighted in your interest in space news, and to ensure you do not miss future episodes, kindly consider subscribing to our channel. Additionally, you can find other interesting news on our profile on social network X, formerly known as Twitter. The link can be found in the video description.